Hey, so if you've been watching the previous videos, strap in. This one's going to get a little bit more heated, I think. For those of you who don't know, my name is Mark Tiffany. I am a fitness coach, owner of Dynamic Core Studios training facility west of Glasgow, dcsfit.com, and generally I'm in the fitness industry. And you'll have seen from the previous videos that I've done, they've sort of got a bit more into depth on my take on political, not agendas, but political reactions to the current pandemic. And I use that word in its most loosest sense because it's not been really considered a pandemic for months. But yeah, for the situation, the crisis situation that we're in, um, and I've been trying to record these videos like separated from when I'm publishing them. So the first one that I recorded, I didn't publish it till the next day, and then I sort of batched the next two and posted them out over the next couple of days. And I've just posted one this morning. Have I? No, I think it was last night actually. But regardless, I sort of posted about it today on my LinkedIn profile and that kind of thing. And then I got to training clients as normal this morning. The last one left, I started clearing up and sanitizing everything. And then I went to just grab something to eat and sort of checked Twitter and things like that. And then I saw what's happening at the moment, which is the idea that there are areas of England that look like they're going to go to tier 4, that the Christmas relaxations are going to be taken away. We already know that Wales are going into lockdown on the 28th. Northern Ireland are going into lockdown on the 26th, although there is at least a time limit on theirs, but I think it's like 6 weeks or something. And in Scotland, it looks like they're having a meeting now as I record this. So by the time I publish it, it could well be that that meeting's out. Maybe there's a decision has been made. I don't know. But the result of it is, and the reason I get frustrated with this is because it's just the same again. And as much as I've been trying to in the previous videos, open a discussion and not put, even though I'm giving my opinions, I'm trying to give an opinion on the basis that please tell me where I'm going wrong. Please tell me that the experts that I'm looking at, where they are flawed in their analysis, or my perception of how the stats are going out there is flawed or whatever. I'm happy for someone to give me this information. But when I keep seeing the same things happening over and over again, it really becomes a bit more grating as time has gone on. Now, how this affects us as a business is one thing. How this affects us as a country is another thing. How if this affects us as a population of Earth is another thing as well. And all of these matter. It's not just about how it affects one person, it's how it affects everyone. If all this was going to do was put us in a position where we had to shut down. That's it. We were out of business and we were done. But the result of it was that the country as a whole would be better off as a result of it. I'm okay with that. So this is not about me taking things personally. I'm okay with that. However, the way that I'm irritated about this is because I have been following epidemiologists. Now, I mentioned Nowakowski, who is an epidemiologist of 35 years, note, in a previous video. So again, I'll reference him because it's the easiest one to go to, but he's not the only one. He's not in isolation. There are reams of epidemiologists and specialists in the area of infectious diseases and all those kind of things. There are reams of them who are all saying the same thing, and they have been saying it for months. Now, the reason that I kind of wanted to put a video out quickly in this is because things keep changing so much, and by the time I go to put something out, it's old news. I mean, this stuff is changing all the time, but it's changing from a political standpoint all the time because it just seems so easy now for politicians to trigger a switch and say, yes, we'll lock down. Remember back in March, when some people were screaming for a lockdown to happen, Boris Johnson was kind of saying, No, this is, like, well, it's an influenza. We're going down the herd immunity path. Yeah, so that was kind of the thing. The idea of locking down the whole country was a big scary prospect. I mean, who does that? It would have to be something of major significance before somebody would flip that switch. But having flipped it once, it just seems so easy to keep flipping it over and over again. And my feeling is that this is kind of running now on the basis of we're working off spreadsheets. We're really just looking at what do the numbers say? Oh, the numbers are going up, we better restrict. We better lock everything down. The numbers are coming down. Okay, we can open things up again. Oh, the numbers are going up. Let's lock everything down. As if it's just that simple, and there are no other consequences to all of this. Now, when I set out to do these videos, I wanted to do a ton of them because I wanted to separate the arguments and the stats and the information, because it would be too hard. I mean, I literally, this could go on for hours, and I'm really going to try not to make that happen here if I start going into all the separate elements. But to touch on a couple of them, there are things like the effects of previous lockdowns. Now, I want to do a video entirely on that at some point. But the first lockdown has provably killed people. Not saved lives, killed people. That's a fact, because you can go and look at the stats. You can go and look at the 5-year average for deaths in every single sector that is listed on the government website. How many people died of cancer? How many people died of heart disease? How many people died of whatever? And what is the 5-year average? And what you can see is that in January and February, we were trending low, slightly, very slightly underneath. I think there was 1 week where it went slightly above the 5-year average by about 3 people or something. But generally speaking, on a week-to-week basis, it was sort of like 20 to 50 people lower than the 5-year average across all deaths. Then the lockdown came. And when you exclude COVID and you just look at the other deaths, the deaths that are coming from non-influenza based deaths, from heart disease, cancer was actually not hugely affected yet. But what we do know is that the number of patients that were being diagnosed with cancer dropped significantly. I think it was down by about 40% or something like that, or it was at 40% of the number that was usually diagnosed in that period. That's not because fewer people are getting it. That's because they just weren't being seen, they weren't being screened, they weren't being caught in time. The effects of that are yet to come. So when we're reviewing what we should do, surely all these things have to be taken into consideration. They have to be. Now, in the beginning, I got it. When it was March and we had to quickly say, people are dying here, let's do something and lock the place down. I got that, and I was on board with it. I thought it was going to be for about 6 weeks or something like that, not 5 months before we were able to open again. But I was on board with the idea. I understood it. But I also made the point at the time, in writing to the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, and getting a reply from the Parliament 6 months later, I made the point that, yes, I understand that you had to lock down quickly and you had to treat things, because remember, the hospitality sector and the fitness industry were all locked down first. And that was on the Friday, and then it was the Monday that the rest of the country was locked down. So they were treated as a sector, and I kind of got that. But what I then said was, when we were reopening, could we look at this more as on an individual basis? Now, if you go back to my second video on this subject about gyms reopening, I did make the point that, and hospitality sector and stuff, that it should be treated on an individualised basis. And the fact that we are now nearly a year down the line and there is no infrastructure there to allow for that to happen, to basically be able to say, no, look, this company, this building is safe based on the way that it's acting. It is completely safe. It's done something completely innovative, completely unique. Let's applaud that and allow that person to go ahead, because they've done a lot. This person over here, they ticked a couple of boxes and they reopened. No, that's not enough. Let's make sure that either they now go more the route of this other person over here, this other business, or they have to close. And treat it that way. Don't treat it as an industry. treat it as individual businesses. Now that's a lot to take on, but they've had a year. They've had a year to be able to put these things in place. And that's where the frustration comes. Now, we're getting back to this again, and we're talking about the reason for this being a mutated version of the virus. And this is the reason why I grabbed my setup here and just decided I was recording something. Because I've been talking about this, and I am not in the industry. I'm not a politician. I'm not privy to this private information. I just follow experts online. And I try and follow what they're saying and look at the research and stuff that they're basing it on to see whether or not it has validity. And the people that I'm looking at have been saying for months that there is a mutated strain of this virus, that it came out of Spain, and it came out of an area of Spain where the lockdowns were incredibly draconian. And because of that, they did not, the virus, the influenza, was not allowed to have nature take its course and spread. And because of that, it slowed down the spread so significantly that it had time to mutate. Now again, I'm not an expert on this. I am basing this on what other people have said and what other people out there have hypothesized and said for months. That they have said this. They said that this came out of Spain, it started travelling across Europe, and it was in London. And they were talking about this in October. This is mid-December. And this is the first we're hearing about it from the government, that there is this mutated strain. So how did they know about it 2 months ago, and the government of our country is only talking about it now? Because maybe nobody wanted to admit that it was the case. Maybe they just wanted to kind of hang on because the vaccine was coming. Maybe they just felt like, well, okay, we want to tell people what they want to hear. I don't know. But what I can say is, if that's what caused it, and again, I'm basing this on what experts are saying. I'm not saying that is what caused it. I'm saying that the people that got it right, that's what they are saying, is that it was the lockdown measures that caused the mutation. Surely, if we just keep locking down, we're going to get a COVID-21, a COVID-22, a COVID-23. It's never going to go away. What we also don't know is, with this mutation, are the vaccines effective against this? Now, I do know that the way that it works is that the protein spike that's within it, if it's the same, then it should still be effective. So it might be. I don't know. I don't know if anybody knows. But what I can say is there are experts out there that have predicted this stuff. They have predicted it from day one, pretty much. They were saying one thing in March, other people were saying another thing, and from what I got from my response from the Scottish Government, second time around, more recently, when I brought this up, was that majority, they're trying to go with a consensus of the majority. What are most experts saying? But when you keep listening to the same ones over and over again, and nothing seems to be getting any better, surely it's time to give the other ones that you're not listening to a chance to raise their voice. Stop censoring them, stop trying to shun what their ideas are, when months later it's being proven that they were correct. But we don't want to let that out there because we don't want to sully the nature of the content that's being put out by the government, by the government's aides and advisors and all these kind of things. Why? Based on what the science is saying from the people who got it right, let's not forget that. They predicted stuff in March and April, and it's come true. Everything they said came to fruition. Maybe not to the exact date, but within weeks. Why are we not listening to them? That's what I don't get. This isn't about me. This is about a frustration of me looking at what is going on in our country and globally. Why are people just doing the same thing over and over again? And one of the things I think with this is, it's our fault. We are to blame. Because when the first strain came out of China, and China ended up having to lock down for a while, then it hit Italy, and it hit Italy with such a force that the death rate was incredible, and then they locked down, and that was ahead of it getting to the UK. Then there was all this uproar about why are we not locking down? Why are we not locking down? Because based on that, that was the only solution. Now there are people dying and we haven't locked down. The political response to that is to do the thing that is safest, or appears to be. It doesn't even have to be the right thing. It just has to be defendable as the right thing. And if everybody's screaming for a lockdown, then that's what they should do. And to be honest, that is what they should have done at that point. Not because it was the right thing to do, but because politicians are there to serve the public. And if the public are in mass numbers screaming for something to happen, no matter how ridiculous Brexit it is, they need to follow what the public ask for. So, yes, absolutely, that's what people were shouting for. But now that there is more data on it, now that there is more information on how this thing is spreading, who it's affecting and what have you, now is the time to be doing what is right for the best interests of the public. When they didn't know and it was all guesswork, you go with the consensus at that point. Now that there is more information, you don't go with the consensus, you go with the facts. You go with what is right. You go with the information from the people who are getting it right. Surely. I understand that the temptation here is we need to protect people. Let's shield them. Let's protect them and lock them down. But when the consequences of those lockdowns are deaths, and that is a fact, it is not up for debate. People died because of the first lockdown. People who did not need to die. Suicides are up dramatically as a result of all of this. And what causes this is another video I want to do on this is the effects of stress. Now this is a stress. Cut it anyway, this is a stress on everyone. Even if you don't feel stressed about it, even if you're sitting at home just relaxing and having a nice old time of it, this is still a stress. Lack of social interaction is a stress on your body. It has been proven that people who have less social interactions have more stress hormone in their body. Again, I'm going to try that. I was tempted there to get jargony. I'm not going to get jargony. So, more stress hormone in their body. They are more stressed. As a result of that, people who are more stressed, their immune systems end up depressed. If we have poorer immune systems, we are less capable of combating this virus. That's a fact. Secondly, when you're stressed, it puts a strain on the hippocampus region of your brain. It can actually shrink it when you're at stress for prolonged periods of time. It's been a year. Therefore, your brain function stops. The hippocampus region actually shrinks. Your brain function gets worse. Therefore, your cognitive function's poorer, and it actually can lead to, or I don't know if this is fact. I think it's more of there seems to be a correlation with things like Alzheimer's and things like that as a result of this. Now, that bit I can deal with separately as more of an in detail thing, but there are consequences. That's just a fact. Other things that cause stress: lack of control. Lack of control over your own circumstances. Now, there's been tests done on this ad nauseum, usually involving lab rats and things like that. But there are tests done, and it's been provable that, for example, if you were to give someone an electric shock, and you were to give them 10 electric shocks a day, you were giving them those shocks, and you told them that, say, there was a bell going to ring 5 minutes before the shock was going to happen. Okay? And someone else, they don't get the warning. It's just going to happen. The person who isn't getting the warning is going to be in stress all the time because they don't know when it's coming. The person who's getting the warning, they know that it's coming, so they can relax the rest of the time and just stress when the bell goes. That's just the idea that then there is... They can understand what is going to happen and when it is going to happen. Now, with these changes that are happening all the time, we're being told this is what the rules are. These are the restrictions. This is how it's going to be. You're going to be. I mean, we had the tiered circuit breaker type things that were going to happen. the central belt of Scotland was moved into level 3 restrictions, and that was supposed to be for a short period of time in order to break, it was a circuit breaker at that point, so certain things weren't able to happen. Gyms weren't able to do classes, for example. We hadn't put them back on anyway, because we just knew that this kind of thing was going to happen, so it was much better to be safe. But those kind of things were meant to come in. It was meant to be a circuit breaker. It was meant to be short. And then it just continued. And then more areas get brought into it. And obviously, if it was continuing, it clearly isn't doing what it's meant to do. The other thing with that is, I will come back to that in a minute, because I was talking about stress. So the factors that cause stress, some of the biggest factors that cause stress, reiterating, is the fact that if you are alone, you're more stressed. We're being locked down, we're being restricted. It's going to cause stress. If you're unhealthy, that causes a stress. If you're not able to exercise, well, in the summer, we were all told to go and exercise, and you could go out for a walk or a run or something like that. You could get outside, you could take some weights outside and do them in the garden or whatever. That was maybe possible. There were some people that were not in the position to be able to do that. You live in a high-rise set of flats, there's no park near you, like what you meant to do. But a lot of people were able to do something. It's now freezing cold, wet, rainy, as much as you can say, but you can still do it. People just won't. So it's going to be a problem. So there's that as well. Then, as I say, lack of control. When you're not in control of what's happening to you, you're not personally in control, or at least don't feel like you have any control. You're now being told what to do. That causes a stress. When it is unpredictable, which all these changes are making it unpredictable. We don't know what's going to happen from day to day. That causes a stress. All of these things cause the stress hormones in your body to increase to the point where it causes problems. It causes health problems, disease problems, brain function problems. It causes all of these things, long-term lasting effects. All the things that on the other side of it, where we talk about, it's not just the deaths for COVID, it's the long-term effects. But you can't just look at this in a vacuum. The rest of the world is still continuing to happen, and we have to look at it from both sides. So I'm not saying you're wrong. Anybody who's arguing that, I'm not saying you're wrong. And for the most part, the people that would be arguing that are people who are being personally affected by it. Either they are in a high-risk category, they know someone who's high risk, or they know someone who's had it and potentially either died or is now suffering the long-term effects of it. Now, we all probably know someone by now who's had this. There have been one person in particular in my family who was in ICU as a result of this. So there are people, usually for most people. I'm not saying this because I don't care. But if you go back to what those experts were saying in the beginning, right at the start of this, of what we should do, generally what they were saying is we need to protect the old and the vulnerable, because the data from China and then that moving across into particularly Italy, the data was showing it was the older population that were at this most severe level of risk. Now, when you go back to the first instance of this, what I heard an awful lot there was that, no, it's not just an old person disease, it's younger people. Look at this person over here. This person died. This person who's 34 and had no underlying conditions has died from this. And they were on the news. The reason being, that is newsworthy. That one outlier of a case is newsworthy. The hundreds and thousands of people that were in their 70s and 80s were not newsworthy. So we weren't hearing about them. They were just one of the stats that was getting listed every day. So when we're seeing all the time the newsworthy events, where it's like every few days there was another person who was in their 40s, in their 30s, on social media, on the news and all that kind of thing, that becomes newsworthy. But we have all this data now. You just have to go and look at the data. The number of people dying from COVID over the age of 70 makes up 77% of the deaths in Scotland. The number of people in care homes, pretty much everywhere, but in Scotland, looking at the data there, made up 49-50% of all deaths. So the suggestion at the beginning, you can go back, go and read Nutwakowski's content, the stuff you can find that hasn't been censored. He was saying in February and March that what we need to do is protect the vulnerable. So it's not like he wasn't saying, don't do anything. It does seem to be that the argument has been for either, oh, we should just let it run riot then, should we? We should just let people die. Of course not. But when we know who is most at risk, protect them. Yes, there are possibilities for other cases beyond that that would end up fatal. And should we ignore those? Of course not. But are we going to trade lives over those? Because the number of people who died in Scotland who were in that category of no underlying conditions, under the age of 60, very, very, very small. A very small number. Now that doesn't make their lives any less significant, and they're not numbers in a spreadsheet. In no way am I saying that. But what I'm saying is, we're probably talking about 100 or 200 people when it came to that, the people that are in that zone. But what we know is the number of deaths that occurred that were above and beyond the norm for the 5-year average for people who had nothing to do with COVID. Their deaths had nothing to do with it. We were talking hundreds of people a week. Hundreds. The stats are on the government website. You can go and look them up. They're not on the front page. You have to download a spreadsheet to be able to see them. But they are there. So go and look up those numbers. Then, when you start talking about the idea that this is to preserve life, then understand the fact that by choosing lockdowns, you're choosing one person, you're saying that somebody's life is more valuable than another person's life. And that's not how our society is supposed to work. It is not supposed to be a case of COVID is newsworthy, therefore we have to protect the people that could potentially die from COVID, but in doing so, be happy enough to kill people who are in a different category that is not newsworthy at the moment. That's the thing that I'm trying to say here. I am not saying that life is not valuable. We should be if we can protect everyone, great, we can protect everyone. Hence why I was not complaining at the first lockdown, at the start of the first lockdown. What I'll also say with this is that these measures are pushing people further and further apart. At the moment, in London, I think it is, there are protests going on. And the police handling of these protests has been appalling, by the way. In London, Liverpool, Manchester, the police action, again, I'm not saying the police are bad here. I'm saying there are individuals within the police who are acting incredibly poorly. And it's on camera. So there has to be some callback on this. But there are people out there protesting against these things. And the reason for that is because people are waking up a little bit. But the problem with it is, the problem with these protests and the people that are on these is because they are now, because of the lockdowns and how strict these are and how much control is being taken away from people, they are being pushed to the other extreme. And I'm seeing people that were posting and putting stuff out that were perfectly well balanced months ago, perfectly well balanced, and that they felt that these were a bit too strict and we shouldn't be going this far or whatever. But they were going along with it all, and they were willing to do what was needed. They are now pushing to the point where they are now sharing the same content that says, oh, this is all about Bill Gates trying to put a microchip in us, which is garbage. If you think that is true, it's just wrong. You just have to look into more of the detail. Or the fact that, oh, vaccines, look at them, they're causing allergic reactions already, we're putting these untested chemicals in our bodies. No, we're not. All all chemicals. People have allergic reactions to nuts or to eggs or to fish or whatever. We don't just ban them all and say nobody can have them. There are some people that have these things. I'm perfectly willing to accept that these things have been tested vigilantly enough given the circumstances. I don't have an issue with the vaccines or anything like that. So when I'm trying to put out these arguments, I'm not going that crazy side of the extreme. But when the government are pushing so hard in one direction, that gap is going to continue to widen. More and more people are going to start believing the things at the other extreme. And they're going to start falling because it's a pushback. It's a pushback to the requests. Now, just one other little thing on that, just to kind of like drive home that point. There is a lot of content out there suggesting that masks should not be mandatory. They do more harm than good. Now, just on that subject alone, it is perfectly understandable. When you look into this, when you look into the science behind it, wearing a mask doesn't protect you. It doesn't protect the wearer, unless it is like a really high-end, proper, like you're basically wearing a boiler suit type idea. The stuff that they use in infectious disease wards and all that kind of thing. I can't remember the code for them, but anyway, and there's a level for them as well. But the ones that we mostly wear, the ones that are kind of like now being made fashionable and that kind of thing, the cloth ones, the disposable ones, what have you, they've been shown that they have no effect. It's not that they have little effect, they have no effect on the wearer. But the hypothesis that they could be helping the wearer from stopping the wearer from spreading does make some sense. If you don't know, if you're asymptomatic and you've got this inside you and you go to cough, surely having something in front of you that's going to stop it, then getting beyond that and onto products and surfaces and things, that kind of makes sense. Okay, so I get that. Now, the thing is that if you go back to the whole point of the fact that lockdowns, like the lockdown in Spain, causes mutations by slowing it down too much, then what you could argue, and many have, and it is a perfectly viable and understandable argument, is that if you are in the presence of someone who is vulnerable, you should be wearing a mask. It also goes back to the thing that it was my father-in-law that ended up in ICU as a result of coronavirus. Prior to that, he was at home. He was diagnosed as positive. He was at home. He isolated himself to a room, and my mother-in-law was sort of bringing him in food and stuff. Now, she was wearing a mask and a shield and all this kind of stuff. Now, I don't know. I don't think he was actually wearing anything. But the wrong person's got the mask on there is really what I'm saying. The person that's infected is the person that should have the mask on. Food comes in, and then when they go, they can take it off to eat. But you don't want to be breathing on the person. I know she went to a great deal to clean everything down and really protect herself. And that's great. I'm not criticising my mother-in-law. I'm just saying that the situation is the person who is vulnerable isn't the person that needs the mask. It's the other people that need the mask. So people who are asthmatic, who are at great risk from this, but wearing a mask could cause them problems. They don't need to wear a mask in that situation, but everybody else around them does. So if you're visiting someone, and I am a big proponent of that as well, is the fact that when people are literally dying, the idea that nobody can come and visit them, like really, your last days on earth and you can't have visitors? To hell with the risks at that point. There has to be a reason for life to continue. There has to be a life to continue for. And this kind of thing is not helping. Not only that, then when you do have all the care homes and everything and people are then isolated, if they are truly isolated, then we're going back to that stress issue as well. Their chance of disease, their chance of major complications of anything then, not just COVID, increase exponentially. But had they been, in the early days of this, put into lockdown, proper lockdown, close the doors, anybody who works there now lives there. Take some of the money that was used to give to businesses like ours to try and stay open, and it wasn't enough, by the way, based on the losses. totally different story. Take some of the billions of pounds that was given to the businesses in order to close them down, allow them to stay open, give them to the care homes, tell the staff that they now must live there, but we will quadruple your salary, quintuple your salary, as a result of you having to stay and live there. Now, some people wouldn't be able to do that, so obviously it would have to be optional, but when you're paying that amount of money, I'm sure they could find enough people to be able to do it. They go and do that and they literally lock them down. Then you're asking other people that are vulnerable to isolate themselves, to protect themselves. Anybody who's a carer for those other people or anywhere near them, they protect those people by making sure they stay as isolated as possible, wear masks, do all the sanitation things and all that kind of thing, and do that. Meanwhile, allow the virus to spread amongst healthy people, particularly teenagers and 20-year-olds and things like that. So yes, when they're going to universities and things like that, and the cases have gone up, well, there's a surprise, but the case numbers, the infection rates don't matter. What matters is, why are those infected people then spreading it in such a way that people end up in ICU, they end up dead. And it's because everybody's been treated too much the same. If they had managed to get it and not spread it, then they're creating that herd immunity barrier. I know people hate that term. I know they do, because of the way that it was treated at the beginning, as if there was only one way to do herd immunity, which is just let everybody get it and whoever dies, they die. But by allowing it to spread significantly between the healthier population, then it's more likely that they are going to be asymptomatic for one thing, there'll be no complications, but there is an immunity barrier starting to form. That's all a vaccine does anyway. A vaccine just gives you a form of herd immunity. This would have helped that process, but it would have done it faster, a lot faster. And by making those people wear masks when they're just interacting with each other, all that's doing is slowing it down and giving it a chance to mutate. You see what I'm getting at here? You see why there's a problem? When we keep looking at things from the point of view of it's just numbers that are getting spouted out in the news, the infection rates are going up, let's lock everything down. That's where the problem comes. We're trying to deal with it the same way. Now, I see the arguments as well of saying that we should more or less be doing what New Zealand did. We should be shutting it down so there's no air travel in, no air travel out. There should be a closed border. Scotland should be closed off from England because that's where it is. It's too late for that. It's just too late for all of that. Now, that might have stopped the mutation as well. That maybe that could have prevented this second wave had we done that and stuck with that all the way through. But again, it's too late for that. But unless we intend to keep those borders closed indefinitely for the rest of our lives, and the other countries, or even one other country is out there, and they keep doing the lockdown thing and allow it to mutate and mutate and mutate and mutate, we're going to be doing this dance for years. Again, this is not my opinion. This is the facts being presented by experts. I'm just reiterating them, and I'm reiterating them with my own frustrations, having read these things 2 months ago, and yet it's only appearing in the news that there could be a mutated strain 2 or 3 days ago for the first time. There's something wrong here. But when we start just having a go at each other, and I'm not trying to have a go at anyone, but when we start having a go at each other, saying, you're wrong, we should be closing the schools, we should be closing everything down, close the borders, close the whatever, all you're doing by doing that is making someone at the other end of the spectrum say, I'm not wearing a mask, sod this, you can't tell me what to do at Christmas, I'm going to go out and have a party. And they push back and they try and do the opposite. They're going to push even harder in the other direction. And that's not going to help anyone. It needs to be a balanced approach. Somehow this needs to be more balanced. And I put this in the post that I put out today based on the previous video that I did, which is the fact that when a politician, who again is a human being, is sitting down looking at this, and they were being badgered at the beginning in order to do lockdowns, then that's now what's in their head. So maybe they're just not looking beyond that to the bigger picture. I'm going to leave it at that for now, because I have way more to say, But I'm going to leave it at that for now because there's enough there to think about, and if this goes on way too long, probably most people won't watch it anyway, but at least I've put it out there. Please, please, take the time to think about this and then make your voice heard. I'm not saying make your voice heard by telling other people they're wrong, just get a more balanced opinion out there. Maybe politicians will start to listen. And then maybe we can find a solution that actually works. Not one you think is going to work, but actually works. Have a great day. Fingers crossed we can get through this. I'll be back for another one soon. Bye for now.